This is The Real, broadcasting around the world. From Tampa, Florida, this is Russ Ward.
Welcome once again to The Real with Russ Ward. I am Russ Ward, and I am the host of The Real, and I haven't made an episode of this podcast in several years. And there's a few reasons for that. I've got distracted with other things, other projects, and quite honestly, I just didn't really have anything to talk about that I thought people would be all that interested in. But I do have some new content that I think is going to be very helpful to the world. And if I can get this into the ears of somebody out there who it can help, it's worth it if it only reaches one person. So that's why I'm making the podcast again. And tonight, what I'm going to talk about is patterns that will destroy your life. Now, I'm certain that all of us have had some type of destructive patterns in our life. Some people have alcoholism, drug addiction, porn addiction, whatever. I've had emotional problems, emotional addictions, and emotional patterns and routines that I just didn't know what they were until I got help for them. And where this really started for me was as a child. And nothing I'm going to tell you in this episode is to make you feel bad for me or to be a victim. This is all just context of the story. I've worked through all this stuff. I'm good now, but it needs to be shared so you can understand where I'm coming from. So I was born into a family with a very young mother, 17 years old, and my dad was 19. And when I was very young, my dad just left and he never came back. So my mom was stuck with me, eventually had 3 other kids, and she's now a single mother of 4. And to be real with you, my mom didn't really do the best job as a mom. She struggled. She put food on the table with the assistance of the government, but her main priority was pretty much going out and having fun and partying. And that left me as the oldest son to basically become a grown-up immediately. And in addition to that, I instantly had massive abandonment issues. My father left when I was just real little. I don't even remember how old I was. And I didn't really get much love, care, or affection from my mother. The only people that really gave me any type of love, care, or affection were my grandparents, but I didn't get to see them all the time. They were working. I sometimes saw them on the weekends. And then later, when I was in high school, I had some football coaches who were just like father figures to me. But throughout my whole childhood, it was a struggle. And it was a constant just mind fuck of basically you're not worthy to have parents that care about you. So that kind of puts this whole thing into context to begin with. What I'm going to talk to you about is how these things led to patterns and routines in my life that destroyed pretty much every relationship I had. Not just romantic relationships, but relationships in jobs, relationships in sports teams, relationships with friends, relationships with siblings. These were so destructive to me that I lived most of my life isolated from other people because either people couldn't stand me because I was ruining relationships or because I didn't even want to try another relationship of any kind because I didn't want to have this happen again. So some of my earliest memories of this happening, and I'm going to get into what I mean by that, is my high school girlfriend. We got together. It was a beautiful little puppy love story, but I still remember the first time we had a disagreement, an argument, and I don't remember what it was about, but I remember it got somewhat heated. And I remember just saying, you know what, fine then, I don't ever want to see you again. And I stormed away. I went home, and I remember laying in my bed that night thinking, my God, I miss her, and all the good things that I thought about her. And I didn't understand that. I thought, maybe I really meant it because it was a bad argument and she was a bad person. And that's just what I thought. But my heart was aching for her. I missed her so much. And really what I started feeling was I felt abandoned by her, even though I had been the one who dumped her, which was, looking back, kind of interesting. And I didn't understand this. And it happened with a couple more girls that I dated along the way. So fast forward a little bit of time. I met somebody when I went on a camping trip. We hooked up. She got pregnant. And I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot allow my own child to grow up without a father. So I instantly proposed to this woman. And the first flight I ever took in my life on an airplane was to Las Vegas to get married to her. I didn't really know much about her. She didn't know much about me, but we got married and we were going to try to make the best of it. Well, come to find out, she didn't really like me that much. I didn't really like her that much. But we ended up being married for 10 years because we had this kid together and I joined the Navy to try to do the right thing and all that stuff that just kind of goes along with when you have a child and you're just like, well, let's see what happens if we get married. So I spent all this time with a woman that I was pretty sure wouldn't have chosen me if I didn't get her pregnant. And that really ties into the story because at the end, I'm going to share with you what my deepest core fear here is that really just messed me up and caused all this chaos in my head to begin with. So time goes on, I get out of the Navy and I get divorced. And after I get divorced, the first meaningful, significant relationship I have is with a woman who seemed like the sweetest in the world. She was just kind, she was loving, but what would happen was she somehow figured out about me that I had an abandonment issue. And she would subtly do it at first. At first, she would just hint that, oh, maybe she wouldn't show up if I didn't behave a certain way. Or another time we were at a concert and there was a misunderstanding and she just straight up left. And I don't even know how she got home. And she told me that I abandoned her. And it was just a pattern and a routine of over and over and over. She realized that abandonment was my trigger and that she could literally control me with it. It got so bad that she would basically dump me every Friday to kind of put me in my place and show me who was boss. And she had a weekend boyfriend. And then on Monday, if I went and begged and pleaded enough, she would take me back. So that was my life with this woman for about 3.5 years. And it was torturous to my soul. It was torturous to my mindset. Along the way, I had other people that I had met, family members, I had friends, I had coworkers, and I always had this pattern and this routine showing up where if there was a disagreement, it would get very heated in my head, maybe not so much on their end. And I would become to the point where I was like, I can't stand you, I hate you. And I would cut all of these people out of my life. It was just a pattern. Boom, 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 boom. And then once I would do it, what would happen was I would feel instant remorse, but then I would either feel too prideful to apologize, or if I did apologize, they were like, what are you, crazy? You just snapped on me and dumped me or broke up with me as a friend or quit your job. People literally thought I was crazy. And I also thought I was crazy because I was like, why am I doing this? I don't want these results. I don't want to have bad relationships. I don't want people to hate me. I want to have good relationships. I want someone to love me. And I just couldn't understand it. And it kept happening and happening and happening. So finally, since I was a veteran, I have the opportunity to go to the Veterans Hospital, the VA. And I went to the VA and I just went to the mental health part. And I said, hey, listen, I'm having a lot of patterns and routines showing in my life. I don't know what's wrong with me, but there's definitely something wrong with me. Can you guys check me to see what type of mental health problems I have? And I know this might sound amusing to some people, but I asked them to check me for bipolar disorder. I asked them to check me for schizophrenia, whatever they could do a test on me for. Please find something wrong with me, diagnose me, medicate me, give me therapy, whatever. Just please make me normal. And they said, listen, man, we can't do that. We can't just come in here and just give you a battery of tests and see what you are. So they put me into therapy, and I was going once a week to talk to one particular therapist. And I'll tell you what, she was probably one of the kindest humans I've ever met in my life. But at first, I didn't really trust her very well. I mean, it took us maybe 10 sessions for me to even believe she had my best interest at heart. Again, because she was a woman and it got back to my mother and all these relationships. And that's going to become a pattern that you're going to notice in this story that I'm going to tell you. But somewhere along the way, she said, listen, do you want to change these things? Do you want to get better? Do you want to have different outcomes and results? Or do you just want to come here and basically waste my time? I said, no, I actually really do. So at that point, I started making an effort, and we started something called cognitive behavioral therapy. And basically what it was designed for was somebody like me who had the thoughts that I had. And how that worked was, in my mind, because of the experiences that I had gone through, my brain created a protection mechanism. So if anything at all went wrong, what my brain would instantly do was go to the worst case scenario. I'll give you an example of a coworker, a manager that I had. So I was out learning to sell life insurance at one point, and I was supposed to wait for my manager at this one spot, and he was late. He was late by like 5 minutes, then 10 minutes, then 15 minutes. And I started ruminating that, oh my gosh, he probably doesn't like me. He probably thinks my production sucks. He probably fired me. He's probably just going to call me later to tell me that I'm fired. And all of these thoughts, all of these negative thoughts came through my head. Now, were there other options of what could be happening? Of course there were. Could he have got a flat tire? Could there have been an emergency? Could it be any variety of things? And yes, the answer is it could have been those things. And the answer that it was those things. So he eventually shows up, ends up he did have a flat tire. We had a great day. So what I learned in cognitive behavioral therapy was to write down the trigger, and she gave me a piece of paper to write this on. So I'd write down the trigger, and then I would write down the instant thought of what that trigger was, and then all the other alternatives that it could have been, and then I would write down what it actually was, what actually happened. And every week, I think I had to bring in a minimum of 5 of these, or she wouldn't even see me. And some weeks I would be writing them in the lobby, in the waiting room, and she'd say, you know what, you didn't do your homework.
come back. She was excellent for me because she held me totally accountable. I had to learn to do this over and over and over again. And eventually I became one of the beta testers of one of the first apps ever created by the VA hospital. They made an app so I didn't have to carry this paper around in my pocket all the time. So eventually I did this hundreds and hundreds of times, and it eventually led to my brain kind of reforming new connections. So when things would happen, there would be an instant pause and it would say, what is the most likely scenario for this? And my brain wouldn't instantly go to the negative. Now, obviously, sometimes the negative was the actual answer, but most of the time it just wasn't. This took 3.5 years for me to get through this. And I thought I was good. I mean, I had overcome all these things. I went to therapy. I had a therapist that told me that I did the work and she was proud of me. And she even gave me a little certificate that said, you actually completed cognitive behavioral therapy. Most people don't even do this. They usually quit. So I felt like I was really good. Along the way, I made a lot of bad decisions. And if you listen to some of my other podcast episodes on the Lead King podcast, you can hear all about those. Some of them are very entertaining. Some of them are tragic, but everything's there if you want to hear about it. But I did lose everything along the way. So what I decided was, since I had just gone through all this therapy, I put in all this hard personal work, and since I just lost everything, I had to start over. What else could I do? The only thing I could do was try again, right? But this time I decided that if I ever had another chance at life and just making it in the world, nobody was ever they were never gonna hurt me again. So I started building these walls around me. And as this happened, I actually started a marketing agency and I started making some money. I started making consistently more than $10,000 a month. And in some months I made considerably more. One month I made up to $37,000 in a month. And believe me, this isn't bragging. I know so many people that make many, many multiples of that. But the reason I share this with you is because for the first time in my life, I was making consistent big amounts of money to me, amounts of money that were changing my life, amounts of money that were buying me freedom. That was the key. So now I had financial freedom, and now I had this new clear mind, and I determined that nobody was ever going to get through to me again. So I started building these huge walls around me everywhere. I just built huge walls. Nobody could get through. And as time went on, I used to sometimes say, I've done a lot of self-work, but I think I might have taken it too far. And a lot of times I was kidding when I said that because I didn't really know if I took it too far or not. The truth is I was pretty sure that I was good and nobody could get through to me. And I was pretty sure that even if somebody did do something mean to me, I probably wouldn't care. I became the guy who gave no fucks, and you could not penetrate my barriers. And I was very proud of that. Now, fast forward a little bit. I had moved to Florida. I had started over. I had a successful marketing agency, and I started dating again. And I started having similar routines, but a little bit different. So back before I did the therapy, it was more of a thing where I was catastrophizing everything. That's where cognitive behavioral therapy came in. It was just everything that happened was some type of conspiracy against me is what my brain thought about it. I didn't realize that I hadn't completely figured it out when it came to interpersonal relationships. And I didn't realize how deep this mother wound I had was, and it kept on happening again and again. So with this new personality and this new money, I was able to go out and date a lot of people, a lot of really beautiful, successful women that I had never had access to before because I had this new confidence and I had the ability to pay for things and go on dates and all this cool stuff. But what I found was that I always caught myself thinking, this will never last 3 months. Or if I book a trip with this person, we'll never get to it. It was like this self-defeating prophecy that I kept on telling myself. And it came true almost every single time. So I'll give you an example. Multiple women that I dated along the way after I had this whole new reboot of my life in Florida, I would have the same thing happen every time. It would be going good, would have a disagreement. The disagreement would get a little bit heated. And they would say something to the effect of, you know what, let's just drop it for now. Let's pick it up later. But I couldn't let that. I had to push and push and push because I needed an answer right now. And if they didn't give me an answer right now, they didn't give me some satisfaction to relieve that anxiety that was growing in my chest, then I would just say, you know what, this ain't worth it. I'm breaking up with you. You're dumped. And I did that. I can't even tell you how many times, countless times. And the thing is most of these disagreements were probably minor, if I'm being honest and I'm looking back. And most of these disagreements, if I would have just given these women some space, they would have probably come back. We would have probably talked about it, or might have even just passed over. Some of them might have been so minor. I was not able to handle the anxiety of sitting with that discomfort of what is the verdict going to be on me, right? When they come back, are they going to say, nope, you're dumped, or whatever negative thing was in my head? So every single time when we got to that point, I would break up with them. But then the weirdest thing ever was I would come back and I would instantly want them back, which ties back to my high school girlfriend where it happened for the first time. And it just kept on happening over and over and over again. And I'd want them back. And sometimes they'd take me back and sometimes they wouldn't. But if they did, what would happen is I would basically go crawling back. I'd feel like I was their little bitch. And eventually I'd hate that feeling, and then I'd break up with them again for real, just because I couldn't stand the feeling that I was basically subservient to them at that point. Again, this is me projecting all this stuff onto myself. Nobody said any of this stuff to me. I made all of this up in my head because that was what made sense to me at the time. So I literally went through countless relationships where this thing was happening, this same pattern, this same routine was happening. So the walls were up, they were strong, and I just kept on going and going and going. Now, something else I did, though, was I built an echo chamber of other men who agreed with me. A lot of people call it the red pill community, something like that. But basically what it was is I would find Facebook groups, I would find YouTube channels, and what I would find is men who were talking about similar experiences to me, these horrible toxic women who did horrible toxic things, and they would all say their things, and I would even join into the conversation, and then it would just validate my belief. I wasn't the problem. It was all these horrible toxic women. And that pattern was just because there's so many freaking bad women out there. That's what I thought. And I just thought, you know what? They're all the same. Maybe there's an exception out there, but man, I'm not going to find her. No way. So this was all working well for me. Even though it sounds chaotic, even though it sounds like, man, that would take up a lot of effort. And it did take up a lot of effort. I still thought I was tough. I had these walls up. I still had money. And I still was the I don't give a fuck guy. So again, like I said, I was taking it too far. So nobody got through to me. And I didn't even realize in the process how bad I was hurting some of these women. Like when I would just do this thing where I'd break up with them out of nowhere and I didn't even give an effort to come back and try to talk to them about it. I mean, I found out later that some of them were like heartbroken over this, and I thought they just didn't give a shit. So that's where things stood. And I was just going throughout life like this. I thought that I had dealt with all my problems. I had learned meditation. I had done some hypnotherapy. I did this thing called Ho'oponopono. It was a Hawaiian type therapy. I learned something called Psych K to basically change my subconscious thoughts in my head. I thought I was a person who had my shit together pretty damn well. And then I was just, getting up to the middle ages of my life, and that there just weren't that many quality women left, and that I was just, in the echo chamber with all these other guys, and I was just meeting all these toxic women, and at least I was strong. At least I gave no fucks until I met somebody who accidentally snuck through the walls. And this is where the story is going to get a little bit more interesting, if you think it was interesting to begin with. So I met a new person. We went on a date, and immediately I was like, this one's different. She is kind. She is considerate. She is super intelligent. She has her shit together. The way she composes herself, the way she speaks, her energy. She had a whole package of things I had not seen combined in one person before. And I knew she was different, and I knew she was special. On top of that, she was extremely beautiful. Not to mention that last, but I mean, she was extremely beautiful. So we start dating, and a few dates in, we start to get pretty heavy into it, man. We were really into each other, and things are going really well. We start getting into it, and we start having some discussions about, our values, our beliefs, our views on the future. How do we conduct relationships? How do we parent? Things like that. And we came to a topic that was super, super hard for me. The topic was she had an ex-husband. Actually, it wasn't even an ex-husband. It was her current husband, and they just had never got divorced. The ex-husband had been with somebody new for like 6 years, so they weren't ever getting back together. And apparently they had just been sharing each other's health insurance or something like that. But she was still legally married to him. And they had this dynamic where they had kids. And then the ex-husband had a girlfriend, and she had kids. And so the woman I was dating was basically best friends with the ex-husband's girlfriend. And then they would have like play dates with their kids, and they'd do cool stuff together with them. And eventually they just started saying, hey, why don't you just come over and have family dinner with them? So she would go over to the house, and she'd be having family dinner with the ex-husband, who was still her husband, and the girlfriend, and all of their kids, her kids, their kids, everybody's kids, right? And she would do this on a regular basis. Like it was just normal. And so when she mentioned it to me, I was like, what the hell? Like, who does that, right? Because it made no sense at all. And so we had some conversations about that, and it got a little bit deeper. I mean, they had traveled together as like kind of like a family. They had more trips planned in the future, and it was becoming very concerning to me. And originally, I just thought I didn't know what to think. And she explained that she had moved from another city and that, it was familiar to her and making a new friend was great and it was great for the kids. And at first, it actually sounded like, yeah, that kind of sounds nice. That kind of makes sense. But then I started really thinking about it and I was like, man, how can I ever really build a real relationship with this woman if she keeps doing that? And so we had a lot of conversations about this and they were difficult to say the least. But what wasn't happening was I wasn't snapping on her. I wasn't dumping her. I was having respectful conversations with her. And eventually she started pulling back from that a little bit. She stopped going to the family dinners as often. And I really appreciated that. But what kept on happening and what really pushed this over the top was that I had never abandoned my beliefs that quote unquote women in general were all the same. I have some strongly held beliefs and I've worked on that and I'm going to get to it toward the end of the podcast, but I said a lot of things. I said that women that have Instagram accounts are lower value than women that don't have Instagram accounts. I really believe that. I thought that women that have Instagram accounts, they're just there to show off, all of them. So what was really the problem here was my absolutist viewpoints where I was saying everybody that is a woman that does this thing is bad. So I was applying all these things from all the women in the world that I thought, and I was projecting them onto all women, including her. Now, the key distinction here was that her behavior was not at all like any of these negative things that I thought about women. In fact, of all the women I've ever met in my life, she was the one who demonstrated the most consistent behavior of a classy woman, somebody who conducted herself in a way that I really respected and admired. She wasn't on Instagram with like thirst trap pictures and bikini and her butt all sticking out and things like that. I was trying to lay down some laws, like laws that weren't really necessary because she didn't behave in a way that required any laws, even if I was going to be doing laws anyway, which I shouldn't have been doing. So how this kind of culminated was one day, we were out and about and we came back and I had to go somewhere, so I didn't have a lot of time. And she just casually mentioned how uncomfortable she felt about something I had said about women in general. And we kind of talked about it a little bit, and then it kind of led to other things, and it led to more discussions about this ex-husband. And finally, it got pretty heated. Now, to her credit, and honestly, both of our credit, we never got loud with each other. We never really got disrespectful, but we did get kind of intense. And in this one, it was more intense than usual. And we went away because I didn't have time to sit there much longer. We usually would sit there and we would talk it out. Didn't have time to do it this time. And we went away and it was really intense and it felt very uncomfortable. We didn't speak for a little while. And then when she did text me later, it just felt like she was so emotionally disconnected from me that it felt like she was abandoning me. And that kind of set off that trigger from long, long ago. And so I was going back and forth with her and I was trying to fix the situation. And she was like, look, I need a little space for this. I need some time to think. And I said, nope. And I just couldn't sit with that discomfort. So again, it came roaring back. I sent a message and I said, hey, listen, I'm breaking up with you. I just can't I can't deal with any of it. And again, just like in my past, I instantly regretted this. I was like, my God, like this woman, the one out of all of them that I admired, the one that I loved the way she carried herself, her morals, her values, just the energy that she brought. And I just dumped her arbitrarily so I could avoid some frustration. So immediately I tried to walk that back and she wasn't really having that. And we did have a phone conversation and I got really heated this time and I got loud and I hung up. So what I had done was I had literally shaken the whole foundation of this relationship. I shook it to the core and then I came back and I said, hey, I didn't really mean it. But what I didn't realize was that she was the kind of person that if you do this to, like, she's not going to be like, oh, that's cool, Russ, just come back, we'll figure it out. It was like, hey, if you could rock this whole thing this quickly over something that we could have talked out, I really need to take some time to think about this. And she didn't just take me back right away. And what happened was she really needed some time away. And so I gave her that time because what else was I going to do? She wasn't going to talk to me. And during this time, the best thing that could have happened to me actually did happen. I could have just said, you know what? Fuck this shit. This is just another one of these crazy women. And I'm just going to block this one out. I'm going to move on and I'm going to keep the walls up. But the problem was she had already got through the walls. I already cared about her so much. I actually loved her to the point where I was just like, I cannot let this one go. I just can't let her go. And I also couldn't contact her because I know I had already been driving her crazy with some of the ways I was just trying to get her to talk to me. And I just, you know what, I'll give her some space. So a week goes by, a full week, and I put myself through some things that I didn't realize that I was going to do. I started researching patterns and routines that I was doing. At first, I was talking to AI. I was like, hey, this is what happened, blah, 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 blah. And what was happening was AI was coming back and was saying, do you realize this? Are you seeing this pattern? And it started getting pretty intense because then I started questioning myself. I started questioning my beliefs. I started questioning how healed I was. I started questioning how quote unquote good I was. I started questioning these walls that I had put up. And I started realizing that I was wrong. And I started realizing that I did have this definite pattern. And it wasn't the same pattern that I had basically overcome through cognitive behavioral therapy. This was a different pattern specifically for women when I had conflicts. Like it was very, very specific. And I hadn't seen it in all these times that it happened because number one, I was just the guy who had all the walls up and I didn't give any fucks. So I just moved on to the next. And the other thing was I had never met anybody to that point that was worth it to me to figure it out about, that was that special that got through my walls. So for over a week, I wrestled with this nonstop. I mean, it was hard. It was tough. It was agonizing. I cried. I prayed. I just didn't know what to do. I was all by myself. I was embarrassed to share this with anybody. I had one friend that I talked to, and he probably thought I was crazy because I just call him up, and he would just be like, "It's gonna be okay, bro. I got you, whatever." But he was probably back at home thinking, "Dude, this dude is messed up. I hope he overcomes this." So after the time of going through all this, and I mean, it was difficult, man. It felt like I had to take a lot of beliefs that I had, and not me, but I felt like God literally put his hand inside my chest and ripped these things out of me physically. That's what it felt. And it felt very painful physically. And it also felt very emotionally draining and emotionally painful. So on the other end of that, what happened was I felt some type of peace. I felt some type of clarity. Like I was wrong. I was wrong to generalize a whole group of people, in this case, women. And the reason I realized I was wrong, because I met one woman, who didn't embody any of the things of the generalities that I was believing. So it just rocked my whole framework, right? I couldn't be the gives a no fucks guy anymore. And I could never look at it the same again because I had just presented myself with evidence of literally almost 2 weeks of wrestling with myself. Why the fuck does this keep happening? And why do I care so much this time? So at the end of the day, that's what happened. And it's not over yet. I don't really know what this pattern, this routine that I went through is called. I know that I've worked on it. I know that I'm kind of practicing a new way of looking at things, kind of like cognitive behavioral therapy, only in a way that I'm trying it on my own right now. Because I'm going to go back to therapy and I'm going to go and ask them, hey, what is this? Do I need to go through another round of cognitive behavioral therapy? Do I need to do something else? What can I do to make this better? I mean, I think I'm on the right track. I am actively putting myself in situations where it would trigger that response, and I'm trying to see how I respond to it. But the reason I share all of this with you isn't to tell you that I'm some tough guy who had a hard life and I overcame it all, because obviously that's not true. I'm not some tough guy when it comes to this stuff. In fact, I was very weak, and I remain very weak in some ways because of just the pain and the amount of feelings that I felt because of this stuff, man. It was not something that was very easy. And you know what the end result was when I really dug down to it? Why did I just fight so hard to make it so I didn't feel these feelings anymore? The root cause of the whole thing was, if I said, you know what, screw this shit, I'm breaking up with you, it was for one reason, because I didn't have to sit with the discomfort of what if she comes back and she rejects me. So the way I looked at it was like a coin flip. If I sat there with the discomfort and we hadn't had a breakup or anything, something like that, she'd have to sit there and she'd have to think about me, and she'd think, do I like this guy enough? Is he worth it? And maybe sometimes the answer would be no. And I would have to deal with that. And the pain of that type of rejection directly links back to the rejection of my father and my mother and all these things along the way. It was something that I guess I determined in my mind that I could no longer tolerate. So rather than come to that, I would just end it and remove all possibility of that. Now, what I did along the way was I also took out the possibility that they might actually come back in a positive way and we might actually have a good result. But I took away every single chance of a positive result because I just was not willing to sit with that discomfort any longer. And what I found at the end was that the true fear, the deepest, darkest fear that I had was that when it came down to it, when somebody knew the real me, everything about me, the good, the bad, the ugly, the crazy shit that I think in my head sometimes, when they really knew the real me, they wouldn't choose me. They would choose to say no. And so I was ultimately pushing and pushing and pushing people away because I didn't want them to get to the point where they got to really know the real me, and then they could say no and they could not choose me, and I didn't have to feel that pain again. So that's where this story leaves off. I'm working on it. I am actively going to go see a therapist about this. And I wanted to share this with the world in a very raw and vulnerable way. It's very fresh to me. And the reason I'm doing it now is because it's so fresh on my mind. I was able to bring up a lot of these details and share them. But what I'm thinking is that there's a lot of people out there, both men and women, who have gone through similar circumstances in their life. Maybe as a child, maybe they were abandoned, maybe they were abused, whatever it was. And maybe you can relate to some of this stuff. And maybe if you don't know what's going on with you, maybe I just said something that triggered you to think, maybe I should sit down and wrestle with this. Maybe I should go see a therapist. Maybe I'm thinking that I'm fucking crazy and you're not really crazy. You just have some twisted ways of looking at things that you couldn't really help. That's kind of just where this story ends, guys. But I'll tell you what, if one person out there hears this and it changes their life, if it changes their trajectory, if it changes so they can go down a different path and they can have healthier relationships and they can honestly just have a better life, then it was worth taking the time it did to talk to you about this, because this has been so torturous, so hurtful, so harmful. I probably lost hundreds, maybe even thousands of relationships in my life because of these patterns in my head. So moral of the story is we all have these patterns and routines in our head. Some of them are insanely destructive. And when you notice a pattern of destructive events happening, you have to deal with them. You have to step back and say, what is going on here and what is my role in it? And that's not an easy thing to do. We all have an ego. We all have pride. And obviously, I didn't do a very good job at that for most of my life. And I'm in the situation I'm in. So guys, that's all I got for you today. I hope you took something from my story. I hope this helps somebody. And I'll see you on the next episode.
After 52 trips to Vegas, after selling millions in bootleg DVDs, being sued by the NFL, and owning a multi-six-figure digital marketing business, Russ Ward felt like talking. You've been listening to The Real, broadcasting around the world from Tampa, Florida. We hope you were entertained. We know we had fun, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with Russ on Facebook at RussWard1111. The website is russward.net, and find him on YouTube at russward.tv. Till next time, keep it real.